Thank you for joining us on the Neighborhood Food Network call. Tonight we have special guest Allan Campbell of Food Forest Abundance, and I suggest you type in Food Forest Abundance into your browsers. Open up.
I will put that in
or take a look at it. So Allan Campbell is originally from Uruguay. He's now living in San Jose, Costa Rica. Beautiful. He's a dad of 2 boys, and he is a permaculturist focused on learning, designing, and implementing everything about regenerative, edible landscapes. He loves to inspire people to grow their own food because he loves growing food and spending time in the garden. He's currently an educator and designer at Food Forest Abundance and a guide at Family Permaculture. Welcome, Allan.
Thank you so much, Zen. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, to get to know your community and to share. I think it's all about that, cross-pollinating all these networks.
Yes, thank you so much. We are so excited about what Food Forest Abundance is doing. We have interviewed Jim Gale, and we've talked to several other permaculturists from your groups. You guys are creating a movement across the country, supporting people to create food forests in their backyards, whether you have like a 1/4 acre backyard, tiny backyard, or a huge backyard, planting plants that grow food rather than that just look pretty. And you expressed in one of your emails that you may want to talk about weather and how you could plant plants to deal with extreme weather and, support them to grow. And I know that permaculture has a whole plan where you plant a big tree and then smaller bushes underneath it, and then ground cover like herbs and things like that. Is that all a part of keeping, sort of a cooler climate in some places, or, is that all keep in mind climate things as well? Can you talk a little bit about climate and the food forests?
Yes, for sure. So I guess, yeah, in permaculture, and we use a concept called the food forests, which is a concept where we're trying to, like Anne is showing right now, where we're trying to replicate what Mother Nature does, and what Mother Nature does in a forest. And basically, as a yard or a piece of land that has been degraded starts like regenerating, it tends to go towards a forest. Well, depending on the place on the earth, for sure, but normally it tends to go towards a forest, and this creates several networks. Several layers. I saw the word network and I'm confused. So yeah, several layers of vegetation, and the reason why it does this is to basically be able to capture the sun in the best way. So basically, talking about weather. If we're capturing the sun in our plant matter, then we're keeping that sun energy kind of like on the ground. We're not like really reflecting it to different places. So and then as you have like different layers, you're creating different microclimates as well, right? You have a different microclimate kind of like on the top, you have a different microclimate kind of like on the bottom, and then due to that you can plant different plants. Different plants adapt to this different niches of these microclimates. Regarding kind of like climate in the broader sense, it's interesting that there's a movement happening in some kind of like places of extreme weather. I've heard of it in Arizona, where people are changing their actual lawns. They're changing them to these artificial lawns because there is irrigation bans. You cannot use water to irrigate your land because there's water shortages. So it makes sense that that they're trying to conserve water. So people, instead of like, what are people doing? They're putting these artificial lawns, and that's like that's creating the opposite effect. That's creating the opposite effect because there's like more radiation, there's more like sunlight bouncing off the surface, and people are actually realizing that they're starting to need to water their artificial lawns because it gets too hot. Like the surface of that gets too hot. So it's the opposite. Like when you have plants, the plants transpire. So basically they create moisture in the air, and that creates kind of like a cooling climate. The same as when you transpire, like when you're evaporating water from your skin, you feel like cooler. So it's an interesting concept. There's a lot of things to talk about, climate and food forests. So
can you explain that a little bit more? I've seen a
yeah,
lot of pictures where there's been a desert basically, where the people start planting trees, and pretty soon there's lush. And not only is it lush, but there's a river or a stream where there
yeah.
never was one before. So the tree roots, are they pulling up water from the soil? Is that what's happening there? How does that
Yeah.
happen? How does planting trees in an area get there to be a river come or a stream come through that area?
Well, first, the trees are releasing water into the environment, first of all. So they're the ones that create the clouds and then eventually precipitation. So if you want rain in your area, you need trees. So that's one thing. And then in permaculture, whenever there's kind of like these going against like the desertification.
Mm-hmm.
There's several things happening. First, you're planting like really resistant plants, so that's the first step that can handle the extreme weathers. And then you're also shaping the earth so you can capture the water in the best way. In permaculture, we talk about slow it, spread it, and sink it, and that's relating to water. So instead of water coming and kind of like washing everything away, because the water basically tries to find the path of least resistance, right? So it's going to go perpendicular to the slope. So what you're trying to do, we're trying to create like these ditches, which we call swales, or we can create terraces, or we can create ponds. So we're trying to keep as much water of any of the water that falls in the ground in these deserted areas to stay in the areas so that it doesn't run off. And we do this by like kind of like pooling the water and making it like sink in. And then on the other side of those like pooling stations, let's say of the swales, we're planting trees. So then the trees can retain the water in their trunks and their structure and slowly release it to the atmosphere as well. So yeah, there's several examples of this happening. There's a guy there's Jeff Lawton who's been regreening the desert for a lot of years, if you want to look at that. And then
look at that.
Yeah.
Where is that? Where is that? Anne, do you remember is that China? I think it's China, right?
The lowest plateau.
Yeah, I don't know where that is, but basically, if you see the land has been like shaped.
So I've been looking at some of these pictures. I thought this one was pretty good. For this is more in line with us. This was kind of before and after with
So yeah, there's different strategies in this. In the one that you just showed, it doesn't seem like there's a lack of water, or it's like deserted. It seems more like that the soil is eroded, that there's not that much life. So then there's like other techniques. There you have, it's similar really, but there you're focusing a lot on creating a lot of organic matter on the ground. So so again, like kind of like mimicking a food forest. Whenever you leave a land bare, you start seeing these pioneer species coming in. These weeds basically. We can design that to accelerate. We can put like these like really like supportive functional plants that we can like chop and drop and create a lot of organic matter on the ground. So we're like feeding the soil, basically feeding all the microorganisms of the soil. And once you have healthy soil, you can grow anything on it. I'm right now studying these what they call syntropic agroforestry systems, which are going to be a forest at the end. Where 30% of the system is just functional plants that you're going to specifically chop so you can feed the soil, because the soil is what's going to feed all the biointensity above it. So yeah, feeding your soil, with compost, organic matter, with wood chips, it's really, really important. So depending on your situation, what you use, but normally there's these things like of increasing the organic matter. And I was going to say another specialist in kind of like managing water in these harsh conditions is Brad Lancaster. It's another permaculturist. He's in Arizona as well. You should check him out. He's a genius in that. So
what about some practical things for in our gardens? Let's just say we're looking at planning ahead for next year's garden, or we've got a fall garden going on now.
Yeah.
If we're looking at in the future, there possibly being a bunch of drought like what type of companion plants, what type of plants would you plant next to each other to help support their, being less, the drying of the soil and erosion and, all of that? What type of plants go well together to retain water? Are there suggestions for that?
I would say I wouldn't say specific plants, but I would say look. Well, first of all, try to have your soil covered all the time.
Yes. Okay.
And I know in for example annual gardens, it's sometimes it's a little bit tricky to have like mulch because you might be creating a situation where you invite slugs, for example. So sometimes annual gardens is tricky to have mulch. However, it's important that you still have the soil covered. So it's important that you plant in a way where your plants are covering the soil. And then whenever you have to harvest something, that you have something immediately to plant in to harvest. So for example, in my annual garden, I kind of like, I do kind of like, not rotational, but I kind of do like, how do you say, like rhythmic harvesting and planting. So I don't have like big areas where I like kind of like harvest all at once. I have like different little pieces that I harvest and then I plant something else immediately. So then there's like kind of like little spots that become uncovered for a little bit while something else is growing. But yeah, so that's the way that I do it.
Okay,
Well,
great.
and Mark talked with us last week, a few weeks ago, about cover cropping and
cover cropping, exactly.
crimping it down to stop it from growing, and then planting within there to have automatic mulch.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so that's something that probably you would do here in once the fall harvest finishes, you can cover crop, so then you have like a living mulch there, and then if you're in a really cold season, then you can or cover that up with a tarp, or you can actually at that point you can probably put some mulch in because you don't really care if there's slugs or anything, and you'll also create like a cushion and the buffer for like the cold weather for like the microorganisms to keep on going and they still have food. So at this point, yes, if you don't really have anything planted, I would like do a heavy layer of mulch in your beds for the winter season to go through the winter season. And then regarding the when you were saying water, so yeah, mulching creates a sponge. So the more organic matter you have in your soil, the more it's going to retain water. The more things you have growing on your soil, the more it's going to retain water. So another technique that I do is I when I don't want to around my annual beds, when I don't want to put like mulch right on my annual bed because of the slug situation, I heavily mulch my paths. So then my paths become an absorber of water, and they also become
an absorber of slugs.
Yeah, well, also, but you can, they can tend there, but also like you're like then like seeping nutrients underground to the rest of your system. So that's the way that I do it.
Speaking of nutrients, Anne wants to know, how do you use worm castings? Do you put them on top? Do you mix them in?
Yeah, I think all of those work. You can use them in any way. Basically, like worm casting is a cold compost, so you don't really have to wait for it to cool down, or you're not gonna be worrying about like them like burning your plants, anything like that. Something like like a cow manure or something like that. That it can still like be like heavily kind of like degrading itself and getting really hot and a lot of nitrogen, and could like burn your plants. The worm castings, you can just use them immediately.
Every time I'm digging out somewhere that's not in my garden and I find worms, I carefully carry them over to my garden beds.
Yeah, great. Yeah, having worms is a good sign. They're the worms are aerating the soil. They're decomposing. They're part of the ecosystem. Basically, having biodiversity having biodiversity is the most resilient situation. Of course, then you have to know like, okay, how can I have diversity in things that I can eat, or how can I learn how to eat new things that I didn't know I could eat before, things like that. So yeah. biodiversity is what keeps the planet healthy, basically.
Okay, and you're talking a lot about organic matter. Anne also wants to know, this is different, Ann T. She wants to know, how do you keep fungus and mold from growing in the organic matter, like that mulch and stuff? How do you keep or do you not want to? Do you want to have fungus and mold growing in there?
Yes.
You do?
Okay. Yeah, that's a life. That's a life. That's the life of the soil. There might be like a misconception there that you don't want, like, fungus and yeah, well, mold, I guess mold is bad for breathing, but I don't think you have like mold growing in your organic matter. But yeah, fungus you want, but then you might have fungus on plants. Okay, so that's kind of like a disease on the plant. The plant is not strong enough to, like, hold its own, and and it gets a disease. Yeah, there's different techniques there, but and this is a little bit more technical and a little bit more in depth, so it would have to be researched a little bit more. But basically, you can use kind of like compost teas, or kind of like, yeah, almost like I would call them like weed infusions. We use comfrey, not here, but in where we suggest clients to do in more temperate climates. We do comfrey teas. So we do like a fermentation of the comfrey, and then or stinging nettle. Stinging nettle is pretty abundant in temperate climates. You do kind of like a tea. It's basically like a tea / fermentation of the nettle, and then you're applying that spray to your plants in a foliar way. As I said, this is a little bit more technical because have to know like the ratios and the amount of time to ferment it for, and stuff like that.
How long on average do you ferment the stinging nettle for? Couple weeks,
Yeah,
couple days?
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Like 6 weeks sometimes. I heard with grasses and stuff, if you want to make a fertilizer, you just put a bunch of your weeds in a bucket with water and let it ferment for 6 weeks.
Yeah, and you'll see the fermentation happening, and once the fermentation stops, you're ready to use it.
And it
so I
smells.
did that with comfrey, and I put like, I don't know, 4 cups of it into a watering can, then fill up the rest up with water, and then
you don't use it straight. You dilute it, and it's very stinky, very stinky.
But it's a good stinky.
It's very stinky.
But yeah, that's going to help your plants, to be more resistant with the funguses, with any disease. Basically, you're making the plants stronger. So yeah, and then the compost tea, what you're doing, again, you're kind of like, making a dilution of compost into a water with molasses, and you do like an aerated fermentation. For that one's quicker. That's probably like because you already have like the activity of the compost. That's probably like just a day, depending on what climate, maybe 2 days if you're in colder climate.
A day or 2. Okay.
Yeah.
That's with molasses.
With molasses,
and a bubbler, like you get a little bubbler from the fish tank. Yeah.
And what happens there when you're applying that foliarly is that, like, the microorganisms basically beat any other microorganisms. So they're beneficial microorganisms, so they don't really kill your plants, and then they beat any other kind of like pathogens that might be in your plant. So that's
great.
Yeah. And then also you're like multiplying your microorganisms, in this way too. Because compost is really hard to get, like, to create a lot of compost in bulk. It's a lot. You can compost, your yard waste and your kitchen scraps, and it's great, and you can use that, but you don't create, tons to like fill up your yard, or to fill up a huge raised bed, So, but this way you're like, accelerating the creation of like beneficial microorganisms.
That's great. So somebody asked, how do you know when the stinging nettle ferment is ready, or the tea? How do you know it's ready?
Yeah, so it starts like kind of like bubbling and foaming.
Okay.
And then
bubbling and foaming.
And then it stops, and then it's ready. Kind of like it reached kind of like its finishing point. But yeah,
make sure you have a lid on it.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say, you can try it out and experiment and see how it goes. I would say research some recipes. I don't have any at the top of my head. I could research in our education program, but I don't have it right now.
So, Allan, I found a picture here that I thought would be maybe a good thing to share as far as permaculture.
Yeah. Nice.
And that took
Yeah.
that was 5 years, but look at that. That was somebody's backyard that was doing absolutely nothing. And now
Exactly.
he's got
Wow.
the canopy and he's got,
Yeah, it has like a little shrub layer there. He has like different, like several little shrub layers, or like, you know, like kind of like a canopy and a sub canopy right in front. So in permaculture, you know, to be able to do this, you need to also know like you need to like study your land. So we talk about observation quite a bit, right? So you need to understand like how your sun moves through your land, how the water moves through your land. We do this thing called the sector analysis, right? To see like all the kind of like all the energy influences that come into the land, and then we design based on that. So, for example, if you have like, you know, strong winds, cold winds, you can create a microclimate by creating a wind barrier. So then you can create you can grow things that are not really suited for your climate, but because you created this, you know, microclimate or like stopping the wind, and maybe it's like also south facing, and then you're like capturing the sun as well, then you're able to increase your temperature in that specific area. So then you can grow something that is a little bit more like subtropical or tropical, depending where you are. We basically in Texas we created this microclimate using rocks. So, you know, we created kind of like a heat trap. Of course, like it was more like a heat trap oriented for the winter sun, because you don't really want the heat trap for the summer because probably you burn everything. But it was like a heat trap oriented for the winter sun. So then like the banana wouldn't freeze, you know. And then so, but yeah, the same you can do with like, you know, with shade and yeah, with different elements, getting creative, understanding kind of like how the energies like come into your land, and then adapting. But yeah, at the end of the day, there's a permaculture saying, if you want to live off your garden, you need to live in it. So basically you need to be coexisting with your garden, learning from it, you know, understanding what's going on, creating a relationship with your plants, and just seeing, you know, like I have like 2 gooseberries in a really small plot. One is doing really well and the other one is not doing well at all. So it's like, okay, why is this one doing well? Okay, this one's kind of like in a pot, so it's a little bit above ground, so it's not really, the roots are not really soaking that wet, they're not soaking in the ground. Now is the rainy season here in Costa Rica, but the other gooseberries are in the ground, so maybe like it's too much water for them. So then you learn, you know, okay, that situation didn't work. So
it's a constant learning process.
Learning process.
Yeah. So we only have you till 9 o'clock. We have like 1 minute left. Can you just tell us? Can you tell us a little bit more about? Just tell us, you know, just the next couple of minutes. Tell us a little bit more about Food Forest Abundance, and what can people get if they wanted to hire you to, you know, support them to have a food forest in their backyard. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, our mission is basically to turn lawns into edible productive systems, you know, to bring freedom and bring resilience and sovereignty into our livelihoods. So we have several products. We have consultations. So if you just have some questions, you can buy a consultation. We also have this food forest designs, which range depending on the size of your project. And then we go all the way to homesteading projects as well. So if you have a homestead and you want beyond just the food, you know, like you want to harvest energy from the sun, from the wind, you want to, you know, you want to harvest your water, you know, you want to reuse your water, you want to reuse all your waste, all these things. We also have packages for that. So yeah, just you know, if you're interested, if you need some help, just reach out to us. You know, we're really open. You can just if you want, you can send me a message as well. We're really open. We'll guide you to see like what's the best option for you, and we go from there. And then we have ways of like we have an affiliate program as well. So if you want to, you know, if you want to connect that way. And then we're also always looking for installers, for people, because we're doing designs all over the country and even in the world. If you want to become an installer in your area, we also have packages to become for you to become a partner. So
great. So, yeah. So people could get actually paid to put in food forests in people's
exactly.
backyards. They could be paid gardeners.
Yeah, you become part of our network. You have to actually pay a fee to come in. But then we collaborate with you for you to set up your own business, so you can like promote it, but also if we have designs in your area, we send them your way. So
That's great.
yeah, and we have internal training. I lead the internal training. We have webinars every Tuesday with all the cooperative partners where we get to learn a lot, and peer-to-peer sharing.
That's great. What a network you're creating to support people for food freedom, food abundance.
Yeah,
We absolutely love it. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Allan. We appreciate it.
Yes,
And thank you to
thank
the
you.
whole Food Forest team.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll post this. We'll send you the link so you can share it on social media. Okay, thanks so much.
Perfect. Take care. Ciao.
All right, take care. All right, so next, Anne wanted to share some things. Anne, you have terrible lighting, I have to say. I feel like you're in a dungeon, but okay.
What if I had my
roll
light
with it.
on?
We'll go with it because what you have to say is so important. So please share. So you shared something with me about fungus earlier today, or mold growing on a certain plant that was useful. This woman said the mold was medicinal. Can you share about that?
So this last weekend, I went to the Midwest Wild Harvest Festival up in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, and it was all about foraging. And so I did a walk with an Indian woman, Linda Black Elk, and she was amazing. And she was telling us about all. I don't have I don't have all my notes. I'm going to have to go back and try to put them together because it was hard to try to write notes while she was talking. But one of the cool things was there's so many plants in your backyard that are edible. And but she was telling me about wild monarda, which I planted 2 years ago, and this year it came up like gangbusters. But then all of a sudden it got powdery mildew all over it, and I was so depressed. And so she was talking about wild monarda, which is bee balm. And she said that no, that the powdery mildew is a medicine. And she told me to tincture it. And if you have a friend who has urinary tract issues and anything like that, that it's really good for that. So I'm thinking, oh my God, I have to do some more research on this. So it was really interesting. The foraging piece of it obviously goes beyond growing food in your backyard, but it's also learning about that a lot of these things that we consider weeds are actually medicine and they're actually food. And it rained for pretty much all day Saturday and part of Sunday, but we were out there doing our walks in the woods in our raincoats, and so it was really, really interesting. So I will be doing that. And
so what did she say about the mold growing on the bee balm?
That it was medicine and that you just tincture it with vodka. Just tincture it.
What kind of medicine?
That it helps for urinary tract infections.
Okay, I don't know. I didn't remember if you said that already, but okay, great.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Okay.
So that, I mean, obviously this is stuff that I'd have to do a lot more research on, but
yeah. But she's clearly done research on it. I just thought it was fascinating that a mold can or powdery mildew, whatever it was called, maybe it's something else, but that it could actually be used for medicine. So
well, that's why I purposely wanted to go with an Indian woman who was teaching this class.
Yeah,
because you of all people know that they're really in tune with nature.
Yes, and they pass knowledge down through generations. It's just a way of life. Everybody knows. I mean, maybe not everybody, but the tribal rituals are to pass that information down. It's very, very important. Really excellent. Okay, so somebody asked if you have a favorite book on foraging. I know I have a foraging book, but I don't know what.
So I'm going to tell you something really interesting, and I wish I would have brought the book down here. But Sam Thayer is the author, and I'll put the link to his books on, I guess, Amazon. But I started reading his book, and he was saying that a lot of people that hold on, I have to let somebody in. A lot of people that are writing these books obviously have never actually used these plants. And he talked about this water lily, and he said all parts of it are toxic. So I went and got this book by Dr. Nicole Appelian, who looked like a great book. And I found the water lily, and I looked it up, and the scientific names matched from Sam book to hers, and she was giving recipes on how to cook it. And so I started talking with the author back and forth, and I sent him a picture of it. And he said, well, by the way, the fern that she's got below that in the book is also toxic.
Mm.
So we have to be really, really careful. Sam Thayer, this was actually his conference. So I trust his books, and so let me share
Sam Thayer, Thaer.
Yeah, I'm sharing the book because this is the one I'm reading now, and this is where I found that information.
I mean Thayer. Sam Thayer, yeah.
Yes, can you see that?
Yes.
And
the Forager's Harvest.
So far, this is the one I'm reading. He has several other books, but it's fantastic.
Okay, great. Thank you
for a way to know, what you can eat in your backyard and what not to eat in your backyard. Like I ate a berry from, Virginia creeper, spit it out, and then my lips and my tongue were numb for 20 minutes because it's toxic. I should never have done that, but
right.
I'll never do it again.
Yeah, Mark is saying that dry beans are also toxic until soaked and cooked. Yes, and I noticed that when you order dry beans from Mark's Regenerative Organic Farm in Wisconsin, which is great, called Doudlah Farms, they have specific directions on there that you must soak them and cook them thoroughly because, they don't want people getting sick off it. And most dry bean containers or bags, they don't say anything like that.
So wait, Mark, so once you soak these beans, and you also want to get rid of the soaking water.
Yes, you want to dump that out and rinse it and then cook it. Yeah, most dry beans, you want to soak them for 8 hours and rinse it. Yeah, so if you have an Instapot, my kids have sometimes tried to make the shortcut of just throwing the beans in and cooking in the Instapot. You don't want to do that. You want to soak it overnight for 8 hours and then drain the water and then cook the beans in new water. Okay, same thing with rice. You want to soak rice at least for a couple hours, drain it because you're draining off the phytotoxins, the things that prevent the absorption of minerals. You want to soak your rice, drain it. Some people just rinse it. I mean, you definitely have to wash it off, but it's better to soak it and then drain it and then cook it in fresh water. And it's not that hard. All you do is just take that extra step before you go to bed.
And it makes the rice fluffier because it'll rinse off part of the starchy coating.
Yeah. I soak the rice overnight, but 4 hours is usually pretty good.
Mark?
We say usually 4 to 6 hours, but I guess you can go all the way up to 24 hours for soaking.
Mm-hmm.
You can also get some germination occurring. Then you have some releases of enzymes and a whole bunch of things happening. So you can play with that and see at what point you like it the best.
Okay, thank you. Up to 24 hours. And you start getting a little fermenting going on, don't you? If you get past that point, it starts to get kind of bubbly.
Yep. After about 8, it starts changing. Yep.
Yeah, 8 hours.
Is that for white rice too?
So he's talking about beans.
I don't know about rice. I'm just talking about dry beans, dry edibles.
Yeah, he's talking about beans. For the rice, I've never soaked it past 8 hours, so I don't remember ever doing that.
So Mark, sometimes they say that you can speed things up by pouring boiling water on it and letting it sit for an hour, but you're saying we should probably let it go longer than
that. Well, our beans require a shorter period of time because we don't over dry them, so that ours are fresh, right? So we don't over dry them to the point where they would last for 25 years. So when you get them over dried, it's going to take a much longer time to imbibe water. If they're 9% versus 14-15%, that's a huge difference, and that takes a lot longer to imbibe the water back in. Our because ours are fresh, they don't take quite as long. But if you don't have a lot of time, they're finding significant findings of Instapots are really amazing at getting rid of the toxins and whatnot, and the different types of fiber. So anyways, I think that an Instapot, if you don't have a lot of time, is a great option. But
so it's okay to put the dried beans in and with the water and just cook them right away. You don't have to drain it?
An Instapot they're finding solves all those problems in
Really?
literally is it 2 hours or an hour? I'm not sure. We have a recipe that
Okay.
we're
Wow.
coming out.
Okay.
It does a great job of getting rid of the lectins. So
Oh,
Instapot's really amazing. You can soak and cook and just really shorten the time. It's hard to believe. But there's been a number of tests on Instapots and it is working. It's
okay,
doing a
great.
very good job.
Lisa's asking, how can you tell if dried beans have gone bad?
Well, certainly rancidity, can be an issue. You'll notice that dry beans get darker with age. So as they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, they get darker and darker. So that's a good indicator. But about all you have is some degradation of the carbohydrate. So, a lot of the minerals, maybe less of the enzymes, are still going to be present. But certainly, the fresher you can eat everything in the world, the better.
Okay. So it takes a long time for them. What I'm hearing is, I mean, people have found beans in clay pots in Egypt and planted them, right? 1,000 years later.
Well, yeah, they might not germinate real well, but they'd probably still be edible. Beans don't have a super long lifespan to germination.
Okay.
So some of the other things like lamb's quarter, which is edible, that's a weed, they have found that it's 1,700 years old and it's still viable. Dry beans significantly change after 1 year. So
Okay.
you can get to 60%, 50% after a year, going into year 2, and then year 3, and then you kind of get this residual of 10 to 20%, right?
Okay. So
Like
if we
up
want
to 5 years.
if we're stocking dried beans in our prepper, garage and have a pile in there, we should probably eat it before it gets a year old and then replenish them.
I would rotate your stock. I think that's
Yeah.
great. If you dried them down in an oven or the dryers you were talking about, the little Nescos, and dried them down to 6-8% moisture, they would probably last without any question for 15, 20 years. Okay, but if you take fresh beans that haven't been dried that far down, right? And there's problems with drying that far down. If you get to 68%, every time you touch them, they split, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So at the spec is US #1 is actually 18% moisture. And at that point in time, they don't split. They're very durable. And if you actually put them in your mouth raw, they're actually slightly gummy. Okay. And if you put them in your mouth and you just get a hard split, that's probably 10-12% moisture. If they're a little gummy, you're probably 16 to 18% moisture.
Okay. Wow, I didn't know we'd be talking about the moisture of dried beans tonight.
Well, Frankie was saying, are you equating lectins with the phytotoxins?
Phyto, don't know if I can pronounce the word phytochromagglutinin. It's on the back of my bag. That's the word for the toxin that has to be cooked out of the dry beans. There is some issues apparently with lectins and, a whole bunch of things, joint pain, and Dr. Gundry has maybe overdone it a little bit and talked people out of, dry beans. And I think that's a mistake because not everybody is going to be able to afford meat in the future if things continue the way it's going. And dry beans are an excellent source of protein, iron, and a whole bunch of minerals and nutrients. So, but anyways, yes, lectins is one of the things, but I don't believe it's the lectin element that's toxic. I'm sorry, can't say the word. What? PE, they call it PE. That's the part that's toxic.
PE. Okay, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, so these are 2 beans. I don't know if you guys can see, but
Mhm.
one of them I harvested over 6 weeks ago, and this one I harvested today, and you can just see how much bigger it is. So I'm sure the water,
Okay, there's because of the water content.
yeah, and I can stick my nail into it a little bit.
Mhm.
And an ideal storage too is if you have some old burlap bags, they work very good because they breathe so well, right? So burlap bags are excellent long-term storage, lets the beans breathe. You know, anytime you lock things up in plastic, you know, or whatnot, you have potential problems because that's a live respirating seed, right? And if you take all the airspace away and everything, you can run into some challenges. So just think about that. And when in doubt, if you want more shelf life, go to the refrigerator, go to the freezer, right? You know, that's what Mother Nature does too. So anyways, that'll really preserve things, especially things like milled flour, right? That have a shelf life of probably less than 6 months, 1 year to less than 6 months. So
Right. The mice will find them if I do not have them in a food grade bucket, says Anne. So could we put them in a burlap bag and then in a bucket, but then you're still cutting off the air supply from the bucket.
that,
Maybe,
yeah,
maybe hang
that's
'em.
just dry beans. Yeah, dry beans, right? When I
Okay.
was talking about flours, freezer and refrigerator was
Yeah.
for flours mainly, but you could put anything in the refrigerator, even dry beans would, you know, preserve longer in the fridge or a freezer. Anything does virtually, but yes. Burlap bag, and you know, a dry, cool place, right? So I mean, you know, dry beans will naturally pick up humidity too. So if you put them in too wet of a place, you know, you could also have problems where they might actually want to sprout, you know, or get bigger. So I mean,
Right.
the ideal storage condition is actually 50 and 50. So 50 degrees and 50% humidity would be ideal storage.
Okay. 50% humidity. Okay. So
And
anybody have
most
any
of
other
us would
questions?
have to run a dehumidifier. Like if you're putting something in a basement, that would have to be a dehumidified space.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We have to put one of those in I think we already have one in the root cellar area. Does anybody have any other questions about gardening? Right now, I know a lot of people are harvesting. We're starting to, so I have one question, Mark. We have a cornfield patch. We harvested all our blue corn. We're very excited. We're drying it right now. We're gonna put it through our grinder to make some blue corn tortillas with. Can't wait to do that. But what do we do? Do we just pull up the corn stalks and then just like put them in the compost? What do we do with it? And then would you suggest we plant some cold weather crop in there like kale or something where the corn was? You have any suggestions for that?
Well, because of the size of the stalk, it can take a while to break down. So I would suggest if you have a lawnmower, running your lawnmower over and doing
Okay.
the biodynamic approach, shredding it into little tiny pieces for the microbes, and then throw some, you know, you can do this a variety of ways. You can either put a little bit of soil up on top with a little light tillage. You could dust it with compost, right? You need to do something. You know, microbes don't have legs, right? So if you want the decay process to start going, you need to dust that with microbial population, right? And then it'll take the juices and whatnot from that stalk, the sugars, and it will really ramp up. I mean, there's a huge explosion in the population of microbes when they're exposed to plant saps, right? Juices and sugars. So that's ideal. And then I would please beg everybody to plant some cereal rye.
Oh, yes.
And
I got
then
mine.
great. And then, you know, this is ideal. Well, up here, we're starting to be the ideal season right now. Maybe you'd be a little later, Zen. Maybe you'd be a month later, something more October-ish. But actually, right now, this month and next month are ideal times to plant cereal rye. And then I will be happy within reason to make anybody a free crimper. So I'll do the 2x4 and angle iron and a little piece of rope or whatever. And anybody that plants it and wants one, I'll make them this winter and we can send them out.
Oh, it's so wonderful of you. It's so generous. So Frankie's asking, can goats eat corn stalks?
I don't know why not. I'm sure they can.
And you have goats then?
I do. And Jody wants to convert a small curbside grass strip. Is it better to have the grass removed, or can she just sheet mulch with cardboard and straw?
I wouldn't remove anything. That's food for the microbes, right?
I did
So
my
if
whole
you want,
garden with wood chips and cardboard.
yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, you put cardboard down, make sure it doesn't have plastic on it, this like the tape.
Or
And
coating, or the box.
yeah,
that
or
has the
coating. Yeah,
shiny
no
coating on it.
cardboard that has like photos of pictures of kids and stuff on it, right? So just the plain cardboard with no plastic or tape, and you can then put the mulch on top of that. So yeah, and then Frankie's saying, Jody, if you mulch, the grasses and weeds get composted and feeds the soil. Exactly. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions for Mark? I think I'm gonna time out here early. I'm getting a headache from being on the cell phone.
Okay, well, let me just say something real quick before we
Sure.
sign off. I am working with someone, I don't think he's on tonight. Joe Pesci, him and I are working on, he's creating a seed swapping app.
I saw him earlier. He was on earlier for sure. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
he was.
he's working on it. We've had a few kinks to work out, so I don't really want to share it now, but it's fantastic. Everybody can go up there, create an account. You can list what you have, and then you can request what you want from other people. I mean, you can list how many seeds you have. Like I have 5,000 calendula seeds, but I can have a quantity suggestion of what I think people should take.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
Anyway, so we'll be sharing that when it's all finished. And
That's so exciting. Thank you,
very
Joe.
exciting.
Thank
And
you, Ann.
he's doing such a great job. He's doing all the back end work so much smarter than me, because I can't do any of that stuff. But
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you can do the graphics and coordinating of it. That's wonderful.
yeah, so we'll probably be sharing that within the next week or two, and then we can start swapping out seeds so we can have diversified gardens next spring. Oh, and I have one hint for everybody for next year. Don't plant sunflower seeds in buckets. My garden looks like a war zone.
Okay.
We had a storm last night and all of them have fallen over.
Yeah, don't plant them in buckets. Yeah, plant them in the ground. Next to fences is good too, because then they don't get blown over as much next to fences or edges. All right, I gotta go. I'm sorry, guys. I got a headache from being on this cell phone EMF stuff this whole time. Yes, very good meeting. Thank you all, everybody, for the great questions. I really appreciate you. And thank you to everybody who sent in school lunch samples or donated. We really appreciate the donations. Every dollar counts to getting this testing done. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you for being on the
Bye,
Neighborhood Food Network.
everybody.